Deep in the heart of the Ural Mountains, where ancient secrets sleep beneath layers of time and forest, there stands something that should not exist. A structure so impossible, so perfectly crafted, that the moment you understand what you're looking at, everything you thought you knew about history begins to crumble. Mainstream archaeology wants you to believe it's nothing, just rocks, just nature playing tricks with erosion and chance. But today, we're going to show you why that explanation is a lie. We're going to show you a wall that defies every rule, every timeline, every comfortable assumption about who built what and when. This is a story about stone, about silence, and about the uncomfortable truth hiding in plain sight in a forgotten Russian village. In a remote settlement called Chusovaya, buried under centuries of soil and vegetation, stands a megalithic wall that makes experts fall silent. This isn't a pile of stones. This is architecture. This is engineering. These are massive granite blocks, some weighing more than 10 tons, fitted together in complex polygonal masonry without a drop of mortar holding them in place. The precision is surgical. A knife blade cannot slip between the joints. Each irregularly shaped stone locks perfectly with its neighbors, like pieces of an impossible three-dimensional puzzle. You've seen this before. In Peru, at Sacsayhuaman, where stones fit together so perfectly that not even a sheet of paper can slide between them. In Egypt at the Osirian, where massive blocks create chambers that seem to mock our modern capabilities. On Easter Island at Ahu Vinapu, where ancient builders demonstrated a mastery of stone that we struggle to explain. And now, here in the Urals, we find the exact same technique, the exact same impossible precision, the exact same architectural signature left by builders who supposedly never existed. But here's where it gets stranger. There is no granite anywhere near Chusovaya, not for miles. Every single one of these multi-ton blocks was transported from somewhere else, hauled across difficult terrain, and assembled with technology that shouldn't have existed in this region at any point in known history. The nearest granite deposits are far enough away that moving this much stone would be a monumental undertaking even with modern equipment. Without it, the task becomes nearly impossible. The wall stretches roughly 85 meters in length and rises up to 4 meters high. It follows the natural curve of a ravine, engineered with the landscape itself, designed to act as a retaining structure capable of withstanding enormous hydraulic pressure. This wasn't thrown together. This was calculated. This required knowledge of geology, physics, load distribution, and material science. This required a level of sophistication that makes the official explanation laughable. Because, according to history, this wall was built in the 1720s by Russian industrialists named the Demidovs. They were building a factory, we're told, and needed a pier for loading iron and cast iron onto barges. So they supposedly organized the quarrying, transport, and assembly of thousands of tons of granite using primitive 18th century tools and techniques. They created polygonal masonry that rivals the greatest ancient mysteries on Earth, simply because it was, according to the official story, practical. Let that sink in for a moment. We're being asked to believe that provincial factory workers in the Ural wilderness, with no prior experience in megalithic construction, suddenly mastered a building technique that modern engineers cannot explain or replicate. We're supposed to accept that they did this for a small secondary factory that wasn't even important in the Demidov industrial empire. We're meant to swallow the idea that they invested unimaginable resources into creating an eternal stone monument for a simple loading dock. Does that sound reasonable to you? Because it gets worse. The Demidov family were businessmen, cold, calculating pragmatists who measured every investment against profit. They built their fortune on efficiency and expediency. Every ruble spent had to return value. They constructed dozens of factories across the Urals, and every single one of them used the same materials: wood, small stones, brick, and mortar. Simple, cheap, effective. Their engineering documents show us exactly how they built. We have the plans. We have the records. And nowhere, not in any other Demidov enterprise, do we find anything remotely resembling the megalithic construction at Chusovaya. This wall is a complete anomaly. It stands alone, unique, technologically incomprehensible within its supposed historical context. Now, let's talk about what it would actually take to build this structure with 18th century technology. First, you need to find granite. You send expeditions into the wilderness to locate suitable deposits. Then you need to quarry it. You're working with hand tools, picks, wedges, hammers. You need to split massive blocks from living rock without shattering them. Already, this is a specialized skill requiring knowledge of stone grain and fracture patterns, but let's say you manage it. Now you have blocks weighing multiple tons. Some exceed 10 tons. You need to transport them. There are no roads in the deep Ural taiga. You'll have to build them. You'll need to wait for winter when the ground freezes solid enough to support the weight. You construct massive wooden sleds. You harness dozens of horses or oxen to each sled. You move at a crawl through dense forest, across rivers, over rough terrain. Each block takes weeks or months to transport. You need hundreds of workers just for logistics. Finally, you reach the construction site. Now comes the impossible part. You need to shape these blocks to fit together with millimeter precision. Remember, this is granite, one of the hardest stones known to man. You can't just chip away at it casually. Working granite with hand tools is brutal, slow, exhausting labor. And you're not making rectangular blocks. You're creating complex, multifaceted shapes that must interlock perfectly with irregular neighbors. To achieve the fit we see at Chusavaya, you would need to repeatedly lift and lower each multi-ton block, mark the contact points, remove the stone, grind away microscopically thin layers of granite, then repeat the entire process, over and over, for each of hundreds of joints. This isn't practical. This isn't efficient. This is a technological nightmare that would take years per stone. Any rational factory owner would have said no. Any practical engineer would have suggested alternatives. A wooden crib filled with rubble, a simple stone wall held together with mortar. Either option would be faster, cheaper, and perfectly adequate for the stated purpose. There is no economic, engineering, or logical reason to choose polygonal megalithic construction for a factory pier, unless, of course, they didn't choose it, unless they didn't build it at all. Here's where the official story completely collapses. In the archives and local museum, there are detailed engineering plans of the Demidov factory from 1735, just a few years after the wall was supposedly constructed. These aren't rough sketches. These are precise technical documents showing every element of the industrial complex. The wooden dam, the sluice gates, the factory buildings, the worker housing. Everything is meticulously drawn and labeled. And the massive stone wall, the most expensive, most impressive, most permanent structure of the entire enterprise, it's not there. It doesn't appear on the plans. It's not drawn. It's not mentioned. It's as if it doesn't exist. Think about what this means. Imagine an architect drawing detailed blueprints for a palace but forgetting to include the throne room. Imagine a cartographer mapping a city but leaving out the cathedral. It's impossible. If the Demidovs had invested the staggering resources required to build this megalithic wall, it would have been the centerpiece of their documentation. It would have been a symbol of their power and permanence. It would have been the first thing drawn on any plan. But it's not there. The silence of these documents is deafening. There's only one explanation that makes sense. At the time the plans were drawn, the wall existed, but not as something the Demidovs had built. It was already there. It was old. It was part of the landscape, like an ancient rock formation. They found it, recognized its utility, cleared away the centuries of debris covering it, and incorporated it into their pier. They didn't build it. They recycled it. This single fact destroys the official narrative. The Demidovs were not the creators. They were the discoverers. Which means we have to ask the real question. If they didn't build it, who did? Let the stones speak. When documents fail and history falls silent, the physical evidence tells its own story. And the granite blocks of Chusavaya are screaming a truth that mainstream science refuses to hear. Look at the erosion. These stones show signs of extreme weathering. The edges are rounded and smoothed by thousands of years of rain, wind, and temperature fluctuations. The surface is covered in a thick patina that forms only through long exposure to the elements. Deep cracks harbor ancient lichen colonies, organisms that grow so slowly they serve as biological clocks, measuring the passage of centuries. Granite is incredibly durable. It resists decay better than almost any other building material. To create the level of weathering visible on these blocks requires not decades or even centuries. It requires millennia. If this wall was built in 1720, it should look almost new by comparison. The tool marks should be crisp, the edges sharp, the surface is fresh. But that's not what we see. We see antiquity. We see stones that have stood so long they've become part of the natural landscape, half buried, forgotten, as ancient as the mountains themselves. And then there are the technological signatures. In one massive block, researchers discovered a perfectly circular hole drilled with precision. Its purpose is clear. It was designed to hold a metal pin or clamp connecting this stone to its neighbor. This is a sophisticated joining technique, a method of reinforcing megalithic structures to provide seismic resistance and additional stability. We find this exact same technology in Egypt, where bronze and iron rods were sealed into stone with molten metal. We find it in Peru at Ollantaytambo, where ancient builders used the same method. We find it in Greece at the Parthenon, in Lebanon at Baalbek, across the ancient world wherever the most mysterious and impressive stone structures stand. It's a fingerprint, a signature left by builders who possessed advanced metallurgical knowledge and engineering, sophistication, but it should not exist in the Ural taiga. 18th century Russian factory workers did not know this technique. They had no reason to learn it. They had no tools capable of drilling such precise holes through solid granite. They had no tradition of seismic engineering requiring metal reinforcement. This single hole connects the Chusavaya wall to a global network of megalithic sites, suggesting a common source of knowledge spanning continents and supposedly separated by vast distances and time periods. There's something else, something even stranger. When you examine the joint surfaces of these blocks closely, you notice an absence. There are no clear tool marks, no deep chisel grooves, no hammer impacts, no signs of the brutal mechanical force required to shape granite by hand. The surfaces are too smooth, too precise, too perfect. When stone is worked with primitive tools, it leaves scars, always. The act of chipping and grinding creates characteristic patterns that archaeologists use to identify techniques and date construction. But here, those patterns are missing, or so subtle they suggest a completely different method of processing. It's as if the stone was cut rather than hewn, as if it was shaped with tools that left no trace, as if the builders possessed technology we don't understand. This negative evidence, the absence of what should be there, is perhaps the most powerful testimony of all. It opens the door to theories that sound like fantasy, but explain what conventional history cannot. Ancient legends from Peru and Egypt speak of masters who knew how to soften stone, to make it temporarily plastic and moldable. They speak of plant extracts or acoustic frequencies that could alter the molecular structure of rock, allowing massive blocks to be shaped like clay and fitted with impossible precision before hardening again into solid granite. Science dismisses these stories as primitive mythology, but what if they're not myths? What if they are distorted memories of real technologies possessed by a civilization that existed before recorded history? Technologies that were lost when that civilization fell, leaving behind only their works and fragmentary legends that we no longer know how to interpret? The wall at Chusavaya refuses to behave. It refuses to fit into the timeline we've been given. It stands as a technological paradox, an object that should not exist according to everything we think we know about the development of human civilization in this region. We're left with two choices. Either we accept that 18th century factory workers suddenly achieved a level of megalithic construction that matches the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, investing astronomical resources for no logical reason and then never using that ability again. Or we accept that this wall is far, far older than we've been told, that it was built by someone else entirely, someone whose existence has been erased from our history books. The implications are staggering. If this wall predates the Demidovs by centuries or millennia, it means a highly advanced civilization once existed in the Ural Mountains, a civilization capable of quarrying, transporting, and precisely fitting multi-ton granite blocks. A civilization that possessed engineering knowledge sophisticated enough to calculate load distribution and create structures that would endure for thousands of years. A civilization that used the same construction techniques we find at the most mysterious, ancient sites across the entire planet. This wall is not an isolated anomaly. It's part of a pattern, a global pattern of megalithic construction that connects Egypt to Peru, Greece to Lebanon, Easter Island to the Ural Mountains. Structures separated by vast distances and supposedly built by cultures that never communicated, yet all sharing the same architectural signature, the same impossible precision, the same unexplained techniques, the same technological sophistication that we cannot replicate even with modern tools. What if these weren't separate civilizations developing independently? What if they were all part of something larger? A single global culture that existed before the rise of any nation we recognize from conventional history. A predecessor civilization whose legacy we've inherited, but whose existence we refuse to acknowledge because it would require rewriting everything? The academic establishment will never accept this. There's too much invested in the current paradigm. Too many careers built on the assumption that civilization progresses linearly from primitive to advanced. Too many textbooks, too many theories, too many reputations at stake. So, instead they ignore evidence like the Chusovaya Wall. They invent convenient explanations that crumble under scrutiny. They dismiss, deflect, and deny rather than confront the possibility that our understanding of the past is fundamentally incomplete. But the stones don't care about academic politics. They don't care about tenure or peer review or the comfortable certainty of established timelines. They simply exist, they stand, they wait, and they tell a story that history refuses to hear. So, what really stands in that remote village in the Ural Mountains? Not just a wall, a witness, a fragment of something vast and forgotten, a piece of a puzzle so large we're only beginning to see its edges. It's evidence that our ancestors, our real ancestors, were not primitive hunter-gatherers slowly discovering fire and agriculture. They were builders of impossible monuments, masters of stone, keepers of knowledge that has been lost to time. The wall at Chusovaya is an invitation to question, to look deeper, to stop accepting comfortable lies and start demanding uncomfortable truths. Because if we've been wrong about this one structure, what else have we been wrong about? How many other sites have been mislabeled, misdated, misunderstood? How much of our past remains hidden beneath layers of official narrative designed to protect a version of history that falls apart the moment you examine it closely? This is not the end of an investigation. It's the beginning. The wall stands as proof that there are secrets buried in the earth, waiting to be uncovered. Secrets that will force us to reconsider everything we think we know about who we are, where we came from, and what civilization truly means. The Ural Mountains are old, older than human memory, and they hold into their depths evidence of a world that existed before the world we know, a world we're not supposed to remember, but the stones remember. And now, so do you.